What's up, everybody? It's Danny Green here, and coming up on Inside the Green Room, we got ESPN NBA analyst and SiriusXM radio host Tim Legler. Talks about our chances to win a championship, discusses our expectations, and also gives me some advice on broadcasting. Let's get into it.
We're back with more Inside the Green Room on SiriusXM Podcast Network and NBC Sports Philadelphia. Danny Green, Harrison Sanford, and we are joined by SiriusXM NBA radio host, ESPN personality, and Danny, one of my favorite media personalities, one of the few people that can get by in this industry without a hot take and still be entertaining. One Mr. Tim Legler.
Well, welcome, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, man. Good to be on. I'm looking forward to this, man. This is great.
I appreciate the time, and it's crazy because I did the Syracuse the Sportscaster U thing in Syracuse.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right.
I tried radio. It's so hard, man. It's difficult. So I definitely have some good questions I want to ask and learn about, even though I don't plan on doing radio when I'm done because it's so hard. It's difficult. People don't understand how hard it is to paint a picture, an image for people who are not watching it on a screen and talking nonstop all day and actually explaining to a certain degree. Unbelievable. So thanks for joining us, man. Thanks for taking the time out and kicking it with us.
Taking time, man. You got a lot going on right now, so I appreciate you making the time to do this, honestly.
For sure. Anytime, man. Of course.
He's trying to be a pro, Legs. And one thing I will say, as Danny tries to be a pro in this realm, don't mess up your bag just yet. You can do radio. Don't sell yourself short.
I'm not gonna.
Everything is on the table.
Everything's on the table. I have a lot to work on, man, but I know my strengths. I stick to my strengths. That's like, people are like, hey, do you golf? Do you do? I know if I learned, I'm capable, but no, I'm not gonna go out there and go. I'm not good at it. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm gonna, bet on myself or do something that my strong points make myself look good, I'm gonna do stuff that I know that I can do a lot easier. So yeah, radio is on the table, but it can take some while before I get there comfortable enough to actually talk radio.
Legs, one thing that I'm excited for Danny's second half of the season here, especially now that they have James Harden on the team. But him and I have talked about the one thing that's disappointing about his Philadelphia experience so far is that majority of it has been during COVID. So he hasn't been able to really ingratiate himself in the city like he did with San Antonio or in Toronto or even in Los Angeles before COVID kind of broke out. And one thing I think you're educated enough to tell him about, and I hope maybe he could stick around and really find out what this is, because you're a member of the Big Five Hall of Fame. Yeah. Can you tell him about what that experience is like? And Danny, I don't know if you know of it, but Tim, please educate Danny on what he's missing out on.
Yeah, I think the best way to do that would be to go back to, I was growing up in Richmond, Virginia. A lot of people think I was born and raised in Philly. I was not. I was down in DC, Richmond, Virginia area, and never heard of the Big Five, did not know much about LaSalle University. They found me, 5-star camp and whatnot. Next thing you know, they're recruiting me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go up and take a visit. Learn more about this Big Five. And I will never forget on my visit at the Palestra, which is one of the most storied basketball facilities in the country, 10,000 people sitting basically on top of you. It's on University of Pennsylvania's campus. And I went on my visit. It was a doubleheader. It was LaSalle, Villanova, and then Temple St. Joe's. And here's the thing. At that time, all four of those programs were basically top 25 caliber programs. In fact, my freshman year, the next year when I went there, Villanova won the national championship. The next year, Temple was ranked number 1 in the country most of the year. So it was high-level basketball, but what stood out to me was just the environment of the people in the building. And I remember before the game was even over, I turned to my parents and the coaches that were sitting there, and I said, you got me. This is where I want to play college basketball. And unfortunately, it doesn't have the same meaning that it did because certain institutions started taking games that they were going to make more money on to play national TV. Villanova.
Conferences have changed too, right?
They kind of broke it up. They changed leagues. And so it definitely doesn't have the feel it does, although I know people in the city still get excited when those teams play each other.
Maybe you'll stick around in Philadelphia, maybe even longer than you signed up for, because, if you win a championship in the city, you get the keys to the city. Brings
I've
me to
heard.
the reason why.
Listen. I'm gonna take it a step further. And the day that you guys signed George Niang, literally within a couple of days over the summer, we interviewed him on my Sirius radio show, and he said, "You got any advice for me? You know, being I lived in the city so long." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "The first time you play the Boston Celtics, you need to clothesline somebody." I said, "You will never buy a meal or a drink in the city again. They'll build a damn statue of you outside the building." Like all Philadelphia fans want is grit and toughness and showing up every day. That's all. They don't want to see guys that don't love it. They don't want to see guys that show fear ever. And I think that's part of the problem with what happened with Ben Simmons. I think he knew he couldn't play there again after what happened in the Atlanta series, because that's a blue collar city. Yeah. And a guy, they can't understand that. Play hard, compete, and take a hard foul on a hated team, and they will build a statue of you outside the arena. And that's just the way they are. That's how it is there.
You got to play fearless, man. That's a perfect way to describe it. They do not like fear. So if you come in and give your all and be fearless, they will respect you.
No, knowing Danny though, there's no hard foul coming because he doesn't like paying the league for nothing for things that he doesn't seem necessary.
Hey man, I might in the playoffs I might give 1 or 2, man, depending on who we play. You know, I might give 1 or 2 if it's necessary. And as of late, you know, I don't need to be playing 30 minutes a game anymore, so I don't have to be smart with my fouls as much. Coming off the bench, you got a little more leeway. Playing less minutes, you got a little more leeway to use 1 or 2.
Hey, but to that point, man, I kind of get where you're coming from in a way, because now when you guys take a hard foul, okay, there's going to be 8 replays. There's going to be There's going to be suspensions. There's going to be flagrant 2s. Fines, when I played, you could just pull a crowbar out of your sock if you wanted to, if they weren't looking, because they weren't going to go see the replay. I know there was no replay, so they're like, all right, something happened to that dude. He's bleeding. I don't know what happened, but.
Who are your front runners for the East, and what are your expectations of us now that we got James in the trade factor?
Man, well, for me, you know, I looked at you guys for the last few years, and I said, I didn't think you were a complete enough team. And honestly, I think part of it was because I think it's difficult in the league, the way it looks now in modern basketball, to have a primary playmaker that's not a legitimate threat from all over the floor. I just think it's very difficult when you look at who you have to play. So I thought with all the things that Ben does, defensively and his pace and the playmaking, bottom line is if that's your primary ball handler, that guy has to have an answer for whatever he sees in front of him as a scorer, if that's what it requires. So I always thought, it wasn't going to be good enough. And then obviously when he sat out half the year, you didn't replace him. So I said, well, that's definitely not going to be good enough. Well, all of it changed when you made the trade, because now you addressed that exact need, first of all, and you did it with one of the, the top offensive players in the league. It wasn't just a good point guard. It's like elite level Hall of Fame, unprecedented production, from what he did in Houston, point guard. So I look at you guys now. For me, I'd go by ceiling of these teams. And I'm looking at Brooklyn, and I'm looking at Milwaukee, and I'm looking at you guys, and I'm looking at Miami. I guess, Cleveland and Chicago, you'd have to throw in the mix, Boston. I look at all those teams and I go, ceiling, Philadelphia's got the highest ceiling. Because if this works and these guys can find that ebb and flow and when to be alpha, and they're not stepping on each other's toes, and it works and they enjoy playing together, who has a duo that can control a game like this? Nobody does.
It's my job to monitor Sixers Twitter. There are 2 very loud noises that I could see percolating. One, in regards to Tobias Harris, and that is part of that is the nature of how much money that he makes. And number 2 is Doc Rivers, and part of that is because of his history giving up leads in the playoffs, and obviously last year's run versus the Hawks really stands out to Sixers fans. Do you find yourself optimistic or pessimistic about the performance of those 2 central figures in the Sixers playoff chances?
Well, yes. Right now, obviously, Tobias has been the guy that's had the hardest time adjusting to this, and I know that it's one of those things. It's going to take one game. He'll find his rhythm, but I do think the 6, 8, 10 touches he had a game where it was kind of his set, his possession, when he gave him the ball, they let him go. He could back guys down. He could get into that mid-range pull-up game that he loves. back him down, shoot the turnaround jumper in the post. Like those, he doesn't have as many opportunities to do that now. And so as a result, he's going to have more catch and shoot opportunities. And if he's willing to, he can get some great cut opportunities from the weak side. He gets some stuff running the floor because of the way James gives it up. But the way he got it is going to change. And can he adjust to that when already I know people ride him pretty hard in that city, like the fan base at games, on the media, talk radio. And I go on those shows all the time, and I'm at the building all the time. And I know they turn on him pretty quickly in a given night because of the contract. They just want him to be, spectacular every night. And now, so he's already dealing with that. And now he's actually now taking a totally different role. So I am concerned about that. And then as far as Doc, it comes down to, it's a valid question, right? And I know somebody brought something up about him earlier in the year, and he said, I've earned it. He got snappy with the reporter. And I'm saying, well, yeah, but these things are valid. Like rotations and questions about it, those are valid questions if you know what you're talking about. Now, I'm not talking about some dude who wears a hockey jersey all day. It's a Chicken and Pete's, 24/7. I'm talking about people that know what they're talking about. They have a reason to question certain things, rotations, game management, late game possessions. Those fall in the lap of a coach. And when you look at the track record of some of the series that they have lost when he coached in LA, the 3-1 series leads that got away, and it didn't look like there were answers to stop it. Those are valid questions. He has to prove it. He does. And look, Joel and James have stuff to prove too. I mean, Joel was not good in the Toronto series when they lost to that team that ended up winning the championship. He was not great in the Boston series when he got beat in the bubble. He's got stuff to prove. Now, look, he looks like that's not going to be a problem because he's a different player this year in terms of his mentality. James has stuff to prove because he had some moments in Houston, key moments in playoff series where he did not play well, or he got very passive when he led the league in shot attempts, and all of a sudden he didn't shoot the ball for a quarter. And you're like, what is going on? So all of those guys have something to prove. Now, that can be a great thing because they can be motivated, but it can also add a layer of pressure. And I think that is a genuine concern.
I agree. But I think I'm optimistic about it. I think those guys will come out and perform the way we need them to. And I think Tobias will find his rhythm very, very soon here, shortly enough within these next, we have a tough stretch of games. And I don't think everybody's going to play all those games. But if they do, I think he'll figure it out within the next, 3 or 4 games. Because the game is a lot easier with James on the floor, and I think it's been a while since we've had a floor general like that, or since we had somebody that could push the pace or put pressure on the paint like Ben did before he stopped playing. But now that we have James, who's a threat from the perimeter and put pressure on the paint and can get the pace of the floor, give you easy shots, it's pretty simple. So I think Tobias will figure it out. And I think it's a work in progress for the coaching staff, and we'll figure out rotations. That's going to be the hardest part. Doc and the coaching staff are trying to see what lineups fit, what lineups make sense. Also, he's used to going 10 deep and trying to play everybody. Some games you can, some games you can't. It's hard, but they like to play everybody. So to figure out where, when, and who is going to be the toughest issue. But they got 20 games to figure it out, and I think they'll get it right hopefully before April.
Danny, maybe you could peel back the curtain to your time when you were with the Lakers. You and I talked about how hard at times it was because you guys were so talented to get a rhythm, because you could, you guys could have gone 10 deep. But I feel like, you did go 10 deep. But I feel like the determination to win a title, especially after Kobe passed, allowed you guys to overcome what frankly could be chemistry issues, right? Which could lead to a problem if guys are not getting their rhythm or not playing in a role that they expect to play in. So I wonder if all those things that Tim kind of issued, where Joel feels like he has something to prove, Tobias Harris feels like he has something to prove, I wonder if those contribute to the chemistry of being in a positive direction, despite the fact that it's going to be hard to get a rhythm when you play 10 to 11 guys.
For sure. And I think it all, depending on matchups, you can do it. But most times, in the playoffs, I don't think you can. You can't go 10. I mean, you can go 10 deep, but I think it makes more sense to not go 10 deep. also depending on, I guess, the flow of the game and how the matchups are going, et cetera. If your stars need a little more rest, but most of the time they're going to play, 35 to 40 minutes. The rest of everybody else is kind of picking up the chips, unless, saying you limit that rotation down to like 8 deep, then you guys can kind of, and also other guys can get a rhythm. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be healthy, who's not, but you never know what's going to happen that might cause the rotation to get cut down. But I think it's going to be a decision the coach is going to have to make. Some games, some rotations, some series. All right, we're going to have to play Shake more. We're going to have to play Furk more or less. Or we're going to have to play George more or less. Or Millsap, now we think incorporate him at the 4 spot more or 5 spot. So it's going to be, it's a chess game. And I think it's going to come down to that more so than anything for us. We stay healthy. We have the pieces. It's going to come down to figuring out the rotations.
Yeah, he's 100% right. And I think, from my experience too, in playing and covering the league, it's good. You're going to find out quickly who can do what they need to do, despite the fact that they're not getting consistent minutes necessarily in a given series or over a stretch of time. And it's one of the things that allowed Tyrese Maxey to emerge last year, because he would get very sporadic minutes. And when he got a little bit of run, he always electrified the crowd. He always was an energy guy. He picked you guys up. He had bounce. He was always ready. And not everybody can do that. Some guys, they just can't find their rhythm if their minutes are going to be sporadic and they don't know when they're checking into the game. They don't even know when they go to the game that night necessarily how many minutes they're going to play. That's a difficult thing to do. And the guys that can handle that the best will be the guys that end up, when it's all said and done, the smoke clears, they'll be the guys that are the last ones standing, when you go deeper into round 2, round 3, hopefully round 4.
I'm sure it was happening behind the scenes back in your day, but now the presence of sports betting is so popular right now across the country. I wonder, how do you feel it is to be an athlete today with that being so prevalent? Because it's part of the reason why people can get so energized if Danny misses. If Danny only hits 1 3 as opposed to hitting 2 threes, the reception behind him can be totally different, even if the team wins the game.
Oh, there's no question. And it does add a layer of scrutiny in the social media realm because of that. And it's the last thing on a player's mind. Obviously, you're playing, you don't care. You don't think about spreads. You don't think about any of that stuff. You're just playing and you play the game out, even late, if you hit a shot that's meaningless, you're not thinking about what that could potentially do to people. But the way people are watching games now is completely different. In fact, the way I do my job now, it wasn't prevalent when I played at all. And it wasn't prevalent in my broadcasting career until about the last 2 or 3 years. And now I go on shows created by ESPN that specifically are created to talk about gambling on games that night. And I'm on there and I'm not telling, listen, I always tell people listen, I'm going to gamble with your money because I'm not a big gambler. I'm going to gamble with your money right now. But listen, I can't guarantee this stuff. So they bring me on to ask matchups and things like that. It's a 6.5 legs. What do you think? They're going on the road 6.5 and they drop all this data on me that's related to the line of the game. And I'm always just listen, man, here's what I think is going to happen. Without telling you who to lay money on, I break down the matchup and then that somehow – that will affect somebody watching, man, to go lay money on and probably lose that money. So even my job now is affected, and I'm not even playing, but just in talking about it, I know that I'm influencing what people do with their money on these games because they think I know what I'm talking about. But listen, it's unpredictable, man. You can't predict sports.
Who's going to make the first basket? And they ask who's injured, who's going to play tonight, who's sitting out. I'm like, I'm not help. Don't ask me for nothing. I can't help your bets, man.
With that being said, Legs, let's go ahead and make some bets real quick. When Ben Simmons returns, over under 14.5 points averaged. Legs, over under.
You talking about from the point he returns for the rest of the season?
Correct. 14.5 point score.
Man, oh man, that is tough because he's gonna walk into some opportunities because of who he's playing with. So I would definitely love to pound the under on that. But I'm looking at I'm looking at the attention that KD and Kyrie get and the shooting, that you got to stay home with. And, he gets downhill. I mean, that's for a guy like that to get 14 points, that should be pretty easy. But look, he might be rattled still. I mean, if he's that guy we saw at the end of the season last year, he might still be seeing shadows and ghosts. He might go under. But I just think their offense is going to have so many opportunities for him because of all the attention those guys get. He can get a number of layups and dunks and easy baskets a game to probably go over barely for that number.
He's already a facilitator, but he's probably going to be even more passive being with that group.
Hey, I thought you were going to say, when you started that question about Ben Simmons, I thought you were going to say over under on his first appearance date
in Philly.
March, yeah, with the number being March 10th and a half. Right? If you're doing betting line, right? I would say you give me the over on that number. Give me the over on that number.
So that one. 10th.
Tim, man, we appreciate you so much, man. Thank you for the time.
And my pleasure. I really enjoy it, and I appreciate it. Honestly, it's an honor to be on, man. So I'll be there. I'll be at the arena watching you guys. I'll be watching any chance I get. All my knucklehead friends, obviously, are going to be watching. So
yeah, give them my best, man. Tell the group chat I said hello.
I will. I told them I was coming on earlier today. I said I'm going on with Danny tonight. So they're all just sitting there. They're waiting to hear from me. Yeah, because all you guys are idols to these guys, man.
Awesome.
So I'll be watching. I'll see you down at Wells Fargo, brother.
For sure. Good luck the rest of the way, man, with everything. And I'll see you in person. Tell the guys hello, and we'll catch up soon.
Go get another ring.
Try my best, man.